Have you ever studied something, felt like you understood it, and then completely blank when you tried to explain it? I'm pretty sure everyone has at some point in their life. So, this is the technique I've used to help improve my learning and build actual comprehension instead of just mindless memorization. So, this technique is called the Feynman Technique. Now, what is the Feynman Technique? It was created by Richard Feynman. It's a technique used when studying a subject to build true comprehension versus repeating information. Now, what does that actually mean? When you're normally learning stuff, the issue I have with how school and other sources teach you information is they expect memorization. They want you to regurgitate information to get a good grade. The Feynman technique is a way to actually understand complex subjects and information in depth. It's not just going to help you memorize things, it's going to help you actually understand what you're talking about and how whatever you're learning works. So, let's go into why. So again, builds actual thinking skills, not just repeating info. So why does this matter? So I believe school has plagued people with this idea of regurgitating information and not actually thinking, meaning you are told information and just expected to memorize it without actually understanding the subject. That's why after most people leave school, they forget pretty much everything they've been taught. Because to get a good grade, you do not need to actually know the subject. You just need to memorize whatever they tell you and write it down however they told you to write it down. Now, getting an A in school does not mean you're smart. Now, let me be clear. That does not mean if you're failing school or getting bad grades, you're a secret genius like TikTok will make you believe. It just means that the way school weighs grades over actual intelligence will favor those who can memorize what they're told and write it on a piece of paper how they were told to write it. A perfect example of this is language learning classes. In the US, everyone needs to take, I believe, a minimum of 2 to 3 years of language learning, Spanish, French, Chinese, whatever your school has. But have you ever met anyone who goes, "Yeah, I'm fluent in French because of high school"? Probably not, and they and if they do, ask them how much learning they did outside of school to become fluent. I've never met anyone who's become fluent from learning a language in school. But for example, in school they'll teach you something, Spanish for example, they'll teach you something like comer in Spanish is to eat, but that doesn't really help you because there's tons of conjugations and there's tons of subjects that you have to understand, and without context that's not going to mean anything because it's rarely used in no context, right? So just telling you comer means to eat does not help you. So then they expect you to memorize every conjugation of comer, which is super, super difficult, instead of just memorizing the context and how to apply it to that word. Now, let's get into how to actually use this technique. So as you can see, how to use the Feynman technique. Now this is I don't know who made this, so I just took this off the internet. Don't yell at me. But this is how you use the technique. It's very simple. So you pick and study a topic. You explain the topic to someone like their child who's unfamiliar with the topic at their level of understanding. Use simple language. Side note, very important, it says use simple language. This is super, super important. Even though it seems minimal, the reason using simple language is important is because when you take a complex subject and you are able to simplify it down, that really shows your expertise in that area. If you go on YouTube, you can actually look up people like rocket scientists explaining rocket science to children. And it's fascinating because they're so smart and so knowledgeable on the subject that they're able to explain it to young kids, like elementary school kids. So using simple language is very important. Anyway, Step 3, identify any gaps in your understanding. Now, I'll explain what that means in a minute. That one's where most people get tripped up because it's not very clear, or how to do it is not very easy. 4, return to literature to understand better. So, let's go into how I use it and how you can do it yourself, optimized, because of course not many people are reading books anymore. So, here's how I do it. So, first, you're going to study whatever you're learning. Now, you can do this, however, I've heard people say, don't watch videos, don't do this, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. Watch a video if you want, read a textbook, it's all the same. However you learn best. So if you want to watch a TED Talk on it, go ahead. But watch a video, read a textbook, whatever it is, and then immediately write down a brief explanation of what you just learned. You can do this in your notes app, notebook. I prefer notebook just because I like it being physical, but it does not matter as long as you're learning. And then next is you want to try and teach it to someone and have them ask you questions about it. If you don't have someone to teach it to, then you can just use ChatGPT. That's what I do. So just tell ChatGPT that you're trying to learn a subject and you want it to ask you questions that will identify gaps in your knowledge without giving you advice or answering the question without being asked. Also ask it to act as if it's a third grader, so it starts simple. Now this is actually very important when you are asking ChatGPT to do this for you. Make sure you ask it to ask you questions without giving advice or answering the questions, because if you don't, then it's just going to ask a question and give you the answer, and that's not helpful at all. And the reason I say have it ask as if it's a third grader is because it's going to start off with very simple questions and then get more advanced as you teach it more. It already has all the answers, most likely. So by making it start as a third grader, it's going to start off with the obvious gaps in your knowledge, which are probably the most important ones. And then it's going to get more and more niche. But the more niche you get, the better your understanding will be. So that's why it's optimal. So that's how I use it. So for example, if you were using it for Spanish or any language, if you don't understand something like a grammar pattern, because that's normally what people struggle with knowledge-wise, what you can do is tell it you're trying to learn this grammar pattern and you're going to explain it, and then have it ask you questions about it. And I promise it'll it'll help you understand way quicker, and it'll be way easier than trying to sit there and read a grammar pattern a million times, or trying to write down 10 sentences with the grammar pattern. I've just found that's not optimal. It just takes too much time and is really, really annoying. Versus when something asks you questions, you're using the active recall part of your brain to try and figure out the answer, which is way easier than trying to write down a bunch of sentences, because then you have to remember a bunch of vocab and other stuff, and it's just too difficult. Versus when it asks a question, then you actually understand how the grammar works, and you're not sitting there trying to remember a vocab word that can fit in this right perfect sentence. There's just too much that goes into it. So that's how I recommend it. I think it's optimal, but so you don't need more study hacks or more information. You just need to test what you actually understand. And this is the simplest way I've found to do that, and it's worked for me across a lot of different things. If this is useful, I'll be sharing more on how I actually study and learn things over time. So leave a comment what you might want me to explain next, or if you're in my school community, leave a post in the general chat of what you want to see next.